October 1940. As winter approaches, Britain is now isolated, an island surrounded by Nazi-occupied Europe. And to survive, Britain needs to import hundreds of tons of food, fuel, and weapons every day. And these vital supplies can only come in ships from Canada, across 3,000 kilometers of the North Atlantic. Hoping to cut the vital North Atlantic supply line, Germany launches a fleet of submarines known as the U-boat. Sailing into the Atlantic, the U-boats set out to hunt down and destroy the supply ships. For protection against the U-boats, the ships must form up into huge convoys. And the only place big enough and safe enough is Canada's east coast seaport, Halifax.
The collapse of Europe in 1940 left Britain isolated, and our only chance of survival was to be supplied by transatlantic convoys, and the only port that could do this was Halifax. So Halifax went from being a backwater to the most important harbor in the world. This is the Bedford Basin, and it was here that the merchant ships would collect, hundreds at a time, to be formed up into convoys to make the perilous journey to England. There was no doubt that victory depended on whether or not these convoys could get through.
Between June 1940 and May 1941, almost over a quarter of Britain's merchant fleet is lost. With such losses, Britain cannot hope to survive the year. Dozens of U-boats now move into the mid-Atlantic and station themselves along the long line stretching from just south of Greenland to the Bay of Biscay, with the boats 25 to 30 kilometers apart. When a U-boat spots the merchantmen, he radios the location. Other U-boats gather in a wolf pack to attack and destroy the convoy. To combat the U-boat menace, much of the job of defending the convoys falls to the Royal Canadian Navy, a navy which, when the war begins, has less than a dozen fighting ships. Canada rushes to build a new, cheap, simple anti-submarine warship. It will be known as the Corvette. By the end of 1940, 80 of these small ships roll out of the shipyards and into service. But as more and more merchantmen are lost, every merchant ship of every type, new and old, slow and fast, is pressed into service in the convoys. By the fall of 1941, Canada's tiny corvettes and raw crews are ordered to protect the slow convoys sailing from Sydney, Nova Scotia.
This is Sydney Harbor. Although Halifax was the principal port for the convoys, Sydney was also used throughout the war. In 1940, the Admiralty decided the convoys would be split into two types. The HX series, which are the fast series of ships speeding at 10 to 15 knots, would sail from Halifax, and the SC series, which are the old clunkers, which would sail at speeds of 6 to 9 knots, would sail from Sydney. SC-42 was one of those convoys.
August 30th, 1941. The slow convoy 42 forms up. 62 ships, 500,000 tons of cargo, and 2,700 men from 7 nations begin to move slowly out of Sydney Harbor, headed for Britain. Across 3,000 kilometers of some of the coldest, deadliest waters in the world. And gathering to wait for them are the U-boats of the German wolfpack, Markgraf. August 30th, 1941. Slow convoy number 42 forms up to set sail from Sydney Harbor, loaded with just enough supplies to help England survive for a few more days.
Once the ships were set to sail, each merchant seaman would calculate his odds of survival if he was torpedoed. And there was two things that contributed to that. One was his station within the convoy. A convoy was a series of columns and rows, and of course it was the outside ships which were the easiest targets. The second was the cargo you were carrying. Iron ore or steel, your ship would sink immediately, usually with loss of all hands. If you had wood, your ship would remain buoyant, and then the crew could get off. But the worst of all was the tanker. They were the primary target of the German U-boats, and it would be a very long trip across the Atlantic if you made it at all.
With slow convoy number 42, are ships carrying steel, iron ore, phosphates, and tankers laden down with oil. These ancient, plodding ships that often fall behind are easy prey for the U-boats.
The ships would have sailed in a line coming from Sydney Harbor over here in single file going out to the ocean. There were 63 merchantmen, some tramp steamers, some tankers, even some ocean-going tugs. It was sort of an incredible convoy. And of course, it had a lot of old duds with it, so they'd all be steaming out because they're all coal-fired. And they would have this beautiful procession of ships with their flags and pennants going, heading right out into the unknown.
Under sunny skies, SC-42 heads north, crossing the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But in the Strait of Belle Isle, the convoy enters iceberg fields. Fog closes in. Crowded close together, often only a few hundred meters apart, the ships can easily enter into a fatal collision with an iceberg or with each other. Nervously, each ship signals its warnings. As SC-42 enters the open ocean, the fog lifts, and the convoy rendezvous with its ocean escort, the Canadian destroyer Skeena and 3 corvettes, the Aurelia, the Alberni, and the Conogamy. As the convoy sails out into the Atlantic, it moves beyond the protection of land-based aircraft into the U-boat-dominated zone the sailors fear, the Black Pit. Now only 3 Canadian corvettes and 1 destroyer stand between SC-42 and the deadly U-boats of Wolfpack Mark Graf.
This is His Majesty's Canadian ship Sackville, and it's one of 120 Canadian-built corvettes from the Second World War. In fact, it's today the only survivor. The corvette was designed for anti-submarine patrols, to escort convoys, but particularly to counter the U-boat threat in the North Atlantic. One of the problems with the corvette, of course, was its size. It wasn't really designed for full Atlantic crossings. And you can see right across here how small this ship was. And in the heavy gales and the high seas of the North Atlantic, this thing would pitch and roll, and it was a real thing for its crew to survive. It really tested the crew going across.
Small, highly maneuverable, adept at making quick turns, the corvette is perfect for chasing U-boats, but it is also slow and highly unstable, not ideal for sailing the stormy North Atlantic. Of the 90 sailors on the corvette Conogamy, only 1 in 4 has ever been to sea. One of these experienced sailors is 22-year-old Peter Koch, assigned to a corvette for the first time.
Shortly after we joined, we had a 3-day storm, and this was very rough, and it scattered the convoy. And there's nothing we could do except heave to. you'd be standing on the bridge, and a wave would be higher than the mast of the ship. And you think, you know, if that falls on us, that's it. But suddenly you just rode up the side of the wave, and you're on top, looking down into a valley of more waves. I used to go down into the Aztec hut when it was really bad storm. My Aztec operator and he was from Calgary. We used to sing, "Ma, I miss your apple pie." I don't know why, but it just sort of broke the tension.
Ma, I miss your apple pie. Oh, Mama, I miss you too. Now, Mama, they're treating me all right, but they can't cook just like you.
The merchant ships were getting scattered. They couldn't go anywhere, and we would just had to wait for them, more or less. And then after the storm disappeared, we had to go and find the ships and get them all collected together again, and the convoy went on. This is before we were attacked by the submarines.